NATO Secretary-General says it's up to Russia to decide whether to pursue a diplomatic approach to Ukraine or one of confrontation. Jens Stoltenberg also dismissed suggestions from Ukraine that Western allies had overreacted to the crisis. Britain is proposing to double the number of soldiers deployed in Eastern Europe to increase pressure on Russia's president amid heightened tensions over Ukraine. The Northern Irish city of Londonderry has been commemorating the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, when British soldiers opened fire in a peaceful civil rights march. 13 people were killed and 15 injured. And voting is underway in Portugal's snap general election to choose a new parliament. It was called in December after the minority socialist government's budget was rejected, ending 6 years of relative political stability. And there are your headlines.
We begin with our brand new poll with Ipsos. It shows big challenges for President Biden heading into this year's midterm elections. 3 out of 4 Americans are pessimistic about the state of the economy. Only 29% support deploying troops to counter the Russian threat to Ukraine. And more than 3/4 of all Americans question the president's pledge to consider only black women to replace retiring Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, saying he should consider all possible nominees. Chief Washington correspondent John Carl starts us off.
It was an untriggered flash of frustration triggered by a shouted question.
Do you think inflation is a political liability?
That's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid son of a bitch.
Not President Biden's finest moment. He later apologized, but Biden has ample reason to be frustrated. He starts the second year of his presidency with his lowest approval rating yet. Voting rights legislation failed, as did the centerpiece of his domestic agenda, opposed by every single Republican and tanked by fellow Democrats. Frustration abroad, too. North Korean missile tests, Iran advancing its nuclear programs, and fears Russia may invade Ukraine. Biden is sending some U.S. troops to Eastern Europe, but he candidly acknowledged there's only so much he can do.
I don't think even his people know for certain what he's going to do.
So it was welcome news at the White House this week when word came that Justice Stephen Breyer would be retiring from the Supreme Court, giving Biden a chance to change the subject and to make history, keeping a campaign promise to nominate the first black woman to the Supreme Court.
It's long overdue in my view. I made that commitment during the campaign for president, and I will keep that commitment.
And while the retirement of a liberal justice won't give Biden the opportunity to change the court's conservative majority, maybe, just maybe, he can get at least some Republican support for whoever he nominates.
I'm going to invite senators from both parties to offer their ideas and points of view.
In a foreshadowing of what is likely to come, though, Republican leader Mitch McConnell declared, quote, "The president must not outsource this important decision to the radical left," prompting a sharp response from the White House.
If anyone is saying they plan to characterize whoever he nominates after thorough consideration with both parties as radical before they know literally anything about who she is, they just obliterated their own credibility.
With a 50-50 Senate, there's no room for error. Biden can reach out to Republicans, but he can't count on them. He'll need all 50 Democrats healthy, voting, and on board. In announcing his plan to retire, Justice Breyer invoked Lincoln's words at Gettysburg and offered his own plea for an American democracy that seems more fragile than it has for a long time.
We are now engaged in a great civil war to determine whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. And I found some letters that George Washington wrote where he said the same thing. It's an experiment. And I'll tell you something. You know who will see whether that experiment works? It's you, my friend.
There has been a total confirmed of 9 deceased, ages ranging from young juveniles to middle-aged adults. 2 people were transported to UMC in reference to their injuries. 1 person remains in critical condition while the other one has succumbed to their injuries. Dodge Challenger was traveling northbound on Commerce, approaching the intersection at a high rate of speed. Upon that, witnesses stated that the Dodge Challenger did run a red light and struck multiple vehicles, causing a chaotic event.
Our thoughts and our prayers are with the families who are experiencing a tremendous and unnecessary loss. And let's, as a community, remain vigilant and safe.
As we look at the pandemic, the number of deaths in the U.S. inching closer to that 900,000 number. And the daily death toll, according to the CDC, now averaging more than 2,200. Only about 2/3 of Americans are fully vaccinated, but there are some hopeful signs in the numbers this morning.
Encouraging signs the country could be through the worst of the Omicron wave as cases continue waning. 41 states and Washington, D.C. reporting plunging or plateauing case numbers. Still, more than 62 million eligible Americans remain completely unvaccinated. In 2020, before the World Health Organization declared a pandemic, BioNTech CEO Ugur Shahi teamed up with his wife, BioNTech's co-founder Özlem Türeci, collaborating with pharmaceutical giant Pfizer to develop a COVID shot.
The decision was directly after reading that paper and understanding that we were probably already in the midst of a pandemic. We have to pivot the company and we have to start to develop a vaccine based on our technology.
Take me back to November 8th, 2020, when you both learned that the phase 3 trial was successful.
Albert Bourla, our partner, the CEO of Pfizer, told us that, yes, we have a vaccine, 95% efficacious, and that was a huge relief.
Despite promising COVID-19 infection declines across much of the country, many hospitals report they're still battling with the massive number of patients in need of care.
We don't have beds. We're boarding in the ER, just trying to make everything fit.
This, as Johns Hopkins reports the overall death toll in the U.S. is nearing 883,000 Americans lost to the virus.
Fast forward a little over a year, and the pandemic is not over yet. Does that make you feel disappointed that vaccines haven't been able to speed up the end of this pandemic?
The virus is evolving. That's what viruses do. The virus will still stay with us, for many years, but it will become better.
Now, the BioNTech founders are looking at how this technology can help more people in the future.
We can focus again on the cancer field and other medicines to patients suffering from severe diseases.
And the founders wrote a book called The Vaccine that will be released on Tuesday. To that chilling case of reported mass carbon monoxide poisoning. Multiple people sickened at a hotel pool in Ohio. ABC's Elwin Lopez is in Pittsburgh with the latest. Elwin, good morning.
Hey, Janae, good morning. A terrifying scene there. It all started around 5:30 p.m. when a mother tells us she saw her daughter going in and out of consciousness. She raced to the front desk for help, and a wave of others followed.
This morning, a nightmare in Ohio. A Marysville hotel evacuated Saturday after multiple people were found unconscious in and around the indoor pool, including a toddler.
We're sending medics to 16610 Square Drive for a 2-year-old female who lost consciousness in the swimming pool.
The city's fire chief says it was due to dangerously high levels of carbon monoxide. The 2-year-old's family tells ABC News the toddler's head started to bob and she lost consciousness while her mother was holding her in the water.
The patient is still in and out of consciousness. Believe she did swallow some water.
Then a flurry of calls poured into 911.
We've had about 4 different callers now, all in the pool area, stating people are unconscious. All seem to be children.
Others reporting symptoms like dizziness and a burning in their throats. First responders transported at least 7 people to the hospital. Of those, 2 were reported to be in critical condition. Brittany Geisey says she heard the sirens as she was checking into the hotel. for her son's wrestling tournament.
It's sad that these kids and these parents are going through it and that they were there. They shouldn't have been there.
Of those hospitalized, Nicholas Holmes says 3 of them are wrestlers on his team.
Once I had confirmed that they were affiliated with my team, who are they and what is their condition? I still don't 100% know. Hopefully this doesn't have any long-term effects on their health.
In a statement to ABC News, a spokesperson at the Hampton Inn Marysville says they are fully cooperating with the local authorities as they investigate this incident.
And the city's fire chief says the department is still investigating the source of that carbon monoxide, and what he says he is glad that no one died.
Yeah, but what an alarming story. All right, Ellen, thank you.
The rising popularity of electric vehicles, new models and concepts on display at the Washington Auto Show, even as a chip shortage is making it difficult to keep up with demand. ABC's Kenneth Moten and my good friend has the story. Good morning to you, Kenneth.
Hey, Eva. Yes, the DC Auto Show is back after COVID shut it down last year. That chip shortage, production delays, and higher prices have really made it tough for people to find a vehicle. But organizers here say just because we've been in a pandemic doesn't mean car makers have stopped designing the future. The Washington, D.C. Auto Show is giving attendees a glimpse into the future with a look at some of the hottest new wheels. And this year is all about electric vehicles. Everything from the new Ford F-150 Lightning truck coming with a new 300-mile extended range battery option, a fully electric DC Metro bus, and a futuristic-looking Toyota Rumbus.
They're pushing the electrics, and I think that's great.
These cars powered by semiconductor chips, which are in short supply globally, forcing automakers already slammed by COVID to either slow or halt production.
So all vehicles are going to be consuming a lot of chips. They're all around the vehicle, 360 degrees. They're inside the vehicle. We need more chips, clearly.
The chip shortage also leading to a rise in used car prices, including EVs, by more than 3%. Those soaring prices making affordability a challenge for U.S. consumers, and posing a threat to the Biden administration's goal of increasing electric vehicle sales to 50% by 2030. Days ago, the president praising tech company Intel's plans to build a new $20 billion semiconductor facility in Ohio to address the chip shortage.
20% by 2030. That's what the car is made of. 20% of it. Going to be these computer chips.
On Capitol Hill, the House is expected to take up a bill in the upcoming week that would provide billions of dollars to help with this chip shortage. The Senate passed a different version last year. I know you want to start singing "It's Electric" because we're talking about electric vehicles. And also, this is my second GMA live shot here behind the wheel of a car, and I know that Janae has something to say about it.
While we were in your piece, Kenneth, I showed them the picture that you and I were talking about the other day of you behind the wheel. Of course, you pop in to the car. Do those people know that you're behind the wheel?
They've certainly never ridden with you like we have.
Yes. They gave me the keys. Oh, man. All right.
Millions of Americans in the Northeast are waking up this morning to snow totals ranging from just a few inches to close to 3 feet. The major nor'easter that rolled through overnight Friday and well into Saturday, moving off overnight, but leaving a huge mess in its wake.
That storm sparking blizzard warnings that ran from Virginia all the way up to Maine. Wind gusts over 80 miles an hour recorded in some areas.
And a travel nightmare with thousands of flights canceled this morning and yesterday. Here's a live look from JFK Airport in New York, one of the hardest hit airports in this storm. And more than 50,000 homes and businesses still without power this morning in Massachusetts, that state taking the brunt of the storm. So let's begin right there with Rob Marciano live in Boston. Rob, good morning. A lot of cleanup ahead.
Yeah, we got a lot to dig out from Whit. This storm certainly lived up to its billing. Certainly here in Boston, 23.8 inches of snow falling, tying an all-time record for the most amount of snow, 23.6 falling in just one day. And then, of course, you got these snow drifts, which makes it even more difficult to clean up and walk through. Luckily, they've done a pretty good job of cleaning at least some of the streets and some of the sidewalks. But this was not just an explosive storm, but expansive. I mean, tens of millions of Americans up and down the East Coast getting hit by this one.
This morning, the Northeast reeling after getting battered by an historic winter storm. In Massachusetts, more than 50,000 people without power, now forced to bear unrelenting bitter temperatures without electricity. The nor'easter dumping up to 30 inches of snow in the state's southeast region.
Downtown Boston's getting a good cleaning up.
Boston getting nearly 2 feet.
This is just a ferocious winter storm, and Boston is in the bullseye. Look at these snow drifts. Curtains of snow have been coming down sideways all day long. Visibility at times near zero, and the wind chill's just brutal, well below 0 degrees.
Massive amounts of snow and ice, just one of the many dangers the storm left in its wake. Rising floods surging onto coastal communities. The Cape area getting hammered with over 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts. In Nantucket, high waters engulfing these homes. Some residents seen braving the storm by canoe. Those punishing winds and rough waves sweeping water through the island's roads. Overnight, our ABC affiliate WCVB reporting from the flood zone.
Strong winds pulled power lines to the ground, and coastal flooding left roads covered in slush.
The salt water from the floods now freezing over, wrapping cars like this one in ice. Other vehicles throughout the region stranded in the snow. On I-95 in New York, 2 tractor trailers overturned. The storm snarling travel both on the road and in the air. Around 1,300 flights canceled today, adding to the 3,500 cancellations from Saturday. New York, Philadelphia, and Boston, some of the major flight hubs facing the most interruptions.
This is one of the top snowfalls in a 24-hour period in the history of the state of Rhode Island.
The massive cleanup already underway in New Jersey and New York, where the storm hit early Saturday morning. But that bitter cold still here through the weekend.
And that means that it's not going to start to melt, not even begin to start to melt, really, over the next couple of days, maybe towards the end of the week. All right, let's go over through what's happened and what we think is going to continue to happen. This storm taking a preferred track for an epic snow, certainly for New England. The closer you were to the coast, the more you got as far as snow. At one point, 10 states were under blizzard warning, from Maryland and Virginia all the way up through Maine. 30 inches reported in some spots. The low itself now, although it has bombed out, is beginning to weaken and drift off to sea. All right, 30 inches the winter in Sharon, Mass. Warren, Rhode Island, 24 inches. They had 21 in Providence. Islip, New York. So everybody getting 1 and 2 feet of snow. And then the wind chill's brutal this morning. -5 here in Boston, -2 New York, -10 Albany. But the cold air with this thing has been drawn all the way down into the deep south. Look at Florida's wind chills. Jacksonville, 24, feels like 29 in Orlando. Even Miami feels like 37 degrees right now. You know, they got a shortage of the orange crop this year, on track to be the shortest, the smallest since World War II. And this cold snap is not going to help that. We'll talk more about that in the storms to come in the next half hour. Eva?
I know my friends in Miami are feeling that. They don't actually own real coats. So that's a problem when it gets to 37. Thanks, Rob.
Overseas to the crisis in Ukraine, the Biden administration this weekend still hoping to see some signs of de-escalation from Russia. Russia, in turn, still looking for a promise that Ukraine will never join NATO. ABC's Stephanie Ramos is on the ground there in Ukraine this morning. She joins us live from Kiev. Stephanie, good morning.
Janae, good morning. This is just the most recent time over the last decade that Russian President Vladimir Putin has moved troops to the Ukrainian border. So there's this general feeling of this too will pass, but there are still many people here preparing for a possible invasion.
This morning, mixed messaging from the Kremlin. Russia saying it's returning some of their troops back to their bases after a planned combat readiness check, while thousands more still line Ukraine's border. What it means for rising tensions in the region remains unclear. And Russia continues to surge military equipment to the border. In this new video, we see Russian military vehicles being moved to Belarus, north of Ukraine, where Russian troops have been positioned for nearly 2 weeks. The Pentagon warning Russia could attack Ukraine with very little warning.
This is larger in scale and scope and the massing of forces than anything we have seen in recent memory.
And overnight, the UK saying they will consider a major military deployment to support NATO allies along Europe's border with Russia. Since Ukraine is not part of NATO, it's unclear how the US and the alliance will support the country if it is attacked. But President Biden says he plans to send some troops to the region soon.
Я не критикую президента Байдена.
Ukraine's president criticizing the White House, claiming it is overstating the crisis. But a U.S. official tells ABC News Zelensky is, quote, downplaying the risk of invasion.
There are internal factors within the Ukrainian political system that are driving President Zelensky to reduce the rhetoric around war.
For the people of Ukraine, there isn't a sense of panic just yet, but people are preparing for a possible invasion. This weekend, we got an inside look at a civil defense training class teaching personal defense tactics and survival tips in the event of an invasion.
The main idea of the course is how to organize themselves together with different people, like with the neighbors, because it's much easier to survive if you are doing it together with other people.
The Washington Post is now reporting that Ukrainian intelligence moved confidential documents and equipment out of Kiev into, quote, safe places to the west of the country, all in preparation for a possible invasion. Whit.
So much at stake and still so many questions about what happens next. Thank you so much, Stephanie Ramos there in Ukraine's capital. Joining us now is ABC News Deputy Political Director Avery Harper. Avery, good morning to you. It's always great to have you. So let's start with that tension there on the Ukraine border. Russia says it's pulling back on some of its troops in the region, and yet we're seeing a mobilization of resources and troop movements in other areas. How is the Biden administration responding to this mixed messaging?
Well, we know that there have not been any deployment orders made at this time, and there really hasn't been an appetite here at home to have U.S. troops engage on the border there. The U.S. has really been focused on the threat of harsh economic sanctions should Russia invade Ukraine, while leaving open the possibility of sending troops there should tensions escalate there. But even those economic sanctions by themselves are not without risk. There are concerns that if those actions are taken, that it could anger Putin, that Putin could take retaliatory measures that could affect other European economies. Still, the U.S.'s posture has been to support an independent Ukraine while enhancing its ability to protect itself.
Yeah, with Ukraine not being a NATO member, there's no obligation for the U.S. to move in and help the country defend itself. But I do want to turn to the Supreme Court and the big announcement this week that Justice Stephen Breyer is retiring. We're learning more about the short list of candidates to replace him. President Biden standing by his campaign promise that it will be a black woman. What can you tell us about the process, the timeline, and what's going on behind the scenes here?
Right. Well, we know that President Biden's pick is undoubtedly going to be historic, and it's going to fulfill a promise that he made on the campaign trail. Look, we know that they are moving quickly on this. They are vetting candidates behind the scenes. They are looking to make this announcement by the end of February, which is also Black History Month. And while this pick is not going to impact the balance of the court, it does create a win for Biden during this high-stakes election year, particularly with black voters who, frankly, have been let down by this administration in other areas like police reform and voting rights.
All right, Avery Harper, thank you so much. It will be a busy week ahead. Of course, tune in to This Week later on this morning. George Stephanopoulos goes one-on-one with Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Dick Durbin about the timeline for confirmation hearings that we were just talking about, plus an exclusive with Republican Senator Susan Collins, a key swing vote in the Senate, and an exclusive interview with UN Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield with the latest on tensions between Russia and Ukraine.
Tom Brady possibly calling it a career. ESPN reporting the legendary quarterback is retiring a week after that shocking playoff loss. But we have yet to hear from Brady himself. ABC's Phil Lipoff joins us now with more. Okay, Phil, give us the details here.
All right, here it is, Eva. This morning, the sports world is once again focused on Tom Brady, widely considered the greatest quarterback of all time. Not because he's headed to another Super Bowl, but because he might finally be headed to retirement. This morning, conflicting reports after sources telling ESPN Adam Schefter that Tom Brady, the 44-year-old 7-time Super Bowl champ, is ready to call it quits. But is he really ready? Following ESPN's reporting, social media lit up, sparking massive confusion. TB12's own sports company posted a tribute and then took it down. Shortly after that, Brady's agent saying in a statement, Tom will be the only person to express his plans with complete accuracy. Brady's father telling reporters, Tommy has made no such determination. Even the Tampa Bay Bucks say Brady has not notified the team of any retirement plans.
And he has not announced anything, but he will be doing that relatively soon. So perhaps when he's ready, when he speaks to the Buccaneers, which he hadn't yet done. So I think there are some steps that he wants to go through here before he's ready.
After what may have been his last game, Brady left bloodied, knocked out of the playoffs, telling the world he's not ready for any decision. On a new episode of his Let's Go podcast, Brady reflected on his work-life balance.
My wife is my biggest supporter. You know, it pains her to see me get hit out there. And, you know, she deserves what she needs from me as a husband, and my kids deserve what they need from me as a dad.
A 2021 Super Bowl win with his new team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, amazed even his toughest critics.
The Tampa Bay Bucks, Super Bowl 55 champions.
What do you think my next move should be? Give it to me straight.
I got one word for you: retirement.
Amid the confusion, fans everywhere saying that it was his 20 seasons with the Patriots that earned him the nickname the GOAT. His numbers tell the story: 10 Super Bowls, 7 wins, 5 of them MVPs. Just a few of his NFL records. A standalone career with humble beginnings. Drafted by the Patriots 199th overall in the 6th round draft.
Tom Brady at pick 198 goes to the New England Patriots.
The accolades that Tom Brady has accumulated, I don't know if we were going to see that ever again in this lifetime.
All right, so to be fair, no conversation about Tom Brady would be complete without a mention of Deflategate, suspended for 4 games in 2016, accused of deflating a game ball. Full disclosure, Brady fan, Patriots fan right here. It was a minor blemish. Let's call it a minor blemish on an otherwise historic career. A career that now, possibly, guys, could be coming to an end.
I don't know if Colts fans would call it minor.
Well, but then it was in the second half and he played better. I could go on and on and on.
Either way, we will be waiting on pins and needles to hear from the man, the GOAT himself. Phil, thank you.
The Winter Olympics in Beijing, the opening ceremony just days away. Final preparations underway now with the pandemic looming over the games. Our Maggie Rulli has more from China. Maggie, good morning.
Hey guys, yeah, we're up in the mountain zone right now, about a 2.5-hour drive north of Beijing. It is beautiful, and what's so cool is I actually saw my first Olympian in action, an aerial skier doing a jump right off that mound behind me. It was so cool. All right, well, these games are ambitious for tons of reasons. First of all of this that you see behind me is artificial snow. Organizers have had to work around the clock to make enough of it for athletes to even compete on. Secondly is that ambitious Olympic bubble we've been talking about. We're in it right now. There are dozens of venues and hotels spread out across Beijing, and even more than 100 miles north of where we are. It is all part of this bubble. The hotels are physically cordoned off with fencing. There are specific buses and cars that you have to take. Even our drive up here, those 2.5 hours, we're on a highway that have been shut down, dedicated just for people in this Olympic bubble. It is ambitious. It is going to be a huge challenge. And with more athletes arriving every single day, it is already be putting to the test, guys.
Maggie Rulli will be there covering it all for us.
A road rage incident on a Florida highway ends in gunfire. A new dash cam video shows all of it. In the video, you see 30-year-old Eric Popper in his car reaching for a gun and then shooting nearly a dozen bullets through his window, apparently towards the other driver. Popper telling police he thought the other driver had a gun as well. That driver saying he was unarmed and threw a water bottle at Popper's car after he cut him off. Fortunately, no one was hurt.
North Korea has launched what is thought to be its longest-range ballistic missile since 2017. This marks North Korea's 7th missile test this month. The escalation of the country's weapons program is thought to be a move to pressure the Biden administration into nuclear negotiations that have been at a standstill. South Korea's president saying it could be a sign of possible larger tests to come.
To the issue of bail reform, getting more national attention from President Biden to New York City's mayor, some arguing the system as it stands now doesn't work. But there's a range of opinions on how best to treat people fairly while keeping dangerous criminals off the streets. ABC's Zachary Quiche has more.
A national discussion is intensifying this morning over the issue of bail reform. It's all part of the president's plan to stop the overuse and misuse of jails and reform a criminal justice system that has unequally punished the poor and people of color. But former police captain and current mayor Eric Adams sees it differently. He believes judges should take into account the dangerousness of the suspect and whether or not they pose a threat to the community when deciding bail.
We need to reform a broken system. And what I am saying to them, there are parts that we need to tweak.
Some say a 16-year-old boy charged with shooting an NYPD officer earlier this month, who was released on bond Thursday, is a glaring example of the problem. According to the Times-Union, in the year after New York banned detaining people on a wide range of criminal charges, nearly 100,000 cases saw adults released for offenses a judge could have previously set bail or ordered them held in custody. About 1% of the cases involved people who were rearrested again on violent charges involving a firearm while the initial case was pending. It's been an emotional week for the NYPD. Thousands lined Fifth Avenue in Manhattan to honor the life of Officer Jason Rivera, a 22-year-old rookie.
That same week, as we're preparing for a funeral for one of those officers, a man who shot another police officer in the Bronx, 16-year-old guy, is let free on bail. What does that send to the rank and file of the NYPD?
It's not just in New York. In Milwaukee, police say the man accused of opening fire on one of their own officers this past week was out on bail at the time of the shooting. And it's not just shootings. Police in Los Angeles say they're fighting a losing game of catch and release. After a string of violent smash and grabs in December, 14 suspects were arrested, and not one suspect spent more than 1 day in jail.
The vast majority of crime is committed by relatively few people. And when the few people are constantly gaming the system to understand its weaknesses, the system needs to protect all of communities from those individuals.
Proponents of bail reform insist the system disproportionately targets the poor and minority communities.
The only thing the bail reform laws did was make it clear that we should not be locking up people charged with low-level offenses and doing so to compel dispositions to keep the criminal legal system moving down the track, so to speak, and to keep cases off judges' dockets and ultimately to criminalize populations of color.
The president will be in New York this week to discuss the administration's plans on how to curb gun violence.
We begin with a powerful nor'easter slamming more than a dozen states along the East Coast. Millions from Maryland to Maine feeling the impact. The Boston area is the epicenter. Snow totals expected to top close to 2 feet when the storm moves out later tonight. This satellite imagery shows just how big the reach of the system is. Parts of Long Island digging out from more than 1.5 feet of snow. The storm is also bringing coastal flooding. You can see those waves to places like Scituate, Massachusetts, and wind gusts topping 70 miles per hour. And here in Manhattan, the snow has tapered off with more than 7 inches falling. ABC's senior meteorologist Rob Marciano has been tracking the storm all day. He's live from Boston leading us off. Rob, good evening. How are the conditions?
Well, what a day it's been here in Boston with the blizzard just burying this city. We have winds that just creating these drifts 3-4 feet high, sealing in some of these businesses. But this is an expansive, explosive storm impacting tens of millions of Americans up and down the Northeast coast.
Tonight, that powerful nor'easter slamming the New England coast with heavy snow and whiteout conditions. Parts of the Northeast buried under more than 20 inches of snow. Blizzard conditions hammering several states. From the Jersey Shore to Boston to Maine, New England taking the brunt of it. hurricane-force wind gusts pummeling parts of Rhode Island and the eastern Massachusetts coastline, where the monster storm sent massive waves crashing into homes, flooding neighborhoods. These two residents in Nantucket paddling down the street in a canoe. More than 100,000 customers across the state without power.
This is just a ferocious winter storm, and Boston is in the bullseye. Look at these snow drifts. Curtains of snow have been coming down sideways all day long, visibility at times near zero, and the wind chill's just brutal, well below 0 degrees.
The storm wreaking havoc on the roads. Vehicles stranded in the snow. In New Rochelle, New York, this crash involving 2 tractor trailers overturned on Interstate 95. Our Ike Ajachi monitoring the roads for us in New York City, which is still digging out tonight.
Here in Queens, just a little ways away from Long Island, the epicenter of the storm in New York, the snow, it's going to be blowing all over the place well into the night, making road conditions like this extremely dangerous.
And on Long Island, a major cleanup ahead. Some areas seeing more than 1.5 feet of snow. At least 1 death there blamed on the storm. New York's governor, among several, declaring states of emergency ahead of the storm.
These are dangerous weather conditions, and that's why we're reminding people to avoid travel at all costs.
We're urging everybody to stay safe, stay at home.
And at major airports, a travel nightmare. More than 3,500 flights canceled today alone.
Yeah, people told to avoid travel if they can. Rob Marciano back with us from Boston. And Rob, time this out for us. How much longer is the snow and the storm expected to last?
Well, you can see it's still coming down here in Boston. We do expect it to taper off over the next few hours, but the wind is going to remain. Blizzard warnings remain up for blowing snow till at least 5 o'clock in the morning. Here's where the snow shield is in the center of that low, which is off the coast now of Cape Cod, but we still have winds gusting 20, 30, 40, 50 miles per hour, and that snow stretches all the way back almost to Hartford. But there it goes. It goes away by midnight tonight. Here comes a reinforcement shot of frigid air. These wind chills in the morning are going to be difficult to bear. Minus 10 in Boston, minus 1 in Pittsburgh, but all the way down in the deep south, it'll feel like 34 degrees in Miami. And here in the Northeast, that means that this snow is not going to melt over the next couple days. Whit?
Not out of this yet. All right, Rob, thank you. We turn now to the standoff between Russia and the West over Ukraine. The country tonight on high alert with more than 100,000 Russian troops on the border. But tonight, Russia is saying some of its troops and equipment have completed planned readiness checks and are returning to their bases. The mixed signals putting U.S. officials on edge, Ukrainians preparing and standing ready for whatever may come. ABC's Stephanie Ramos on the ground in Ukraine.
Tonight, with more than 100,000 Russian troops deployed to the Ukrainian border for months, Russia saying some of its troops and aircraft have completed a planned combat readiness check and are returning to their bases. But Russia continues to surge military equipment to the border. In this new video, we see Russian military vehicles being moved to Belarus, north of Ukraine. This comes as President Biden and NATO allies prepare for a potential Russian invasion of its ex-Soviet neighbor.
I'll be moving U.S. troops to Eastern Europe and the NATO countries in the near term. Not a lot.
But no deployment orders have been sent to the 8,500 U.S. troops put on alert. The United States already has 74,000 troops in Europe, nearly half in Germany, with about 5,000 stationed in Poland. The Pentagon warning Russia could attack Ukraine with very little warning.
This is larger in scale and scope and the massing of forces than anything we have seen in recent memory.
But Ukraine's president criticizing the White House for overstating the crisis.
The Ukrainian president doesn't want to create panic.
For the people of Ukraine, there isn't a sense of panic just yet, but people are preparing for a possible invasion. Today, we got an inside look at a civil defense training class in session. About 200 women attending, learning personal defense tactics and survival tips in the event of an invasion.
It's much easier to survive if you are doing it together with other people.
Here, we met Elena Polapenko. She tells us she's very familiar with war after witnessing firsthand the events following the Ukrainian Revolution in 2014.
I hope that there will not be war, but I prefer to be ready.
Preparing for anything. Stephanie Ramos joining us tonight from the Ukrainian capital. And Stephanie, with Russia announcing it's pulling back some troops, what are you learning about what that could mean for tension in the region?
Well, Whit, at this point, officials tell ABC News they haven't seen any signs of de-escalation at the borders. And because of this, the UK is now stepping in. They say they will consider a major military deployment to support NATO allies along Europe's borders. Whit.
Stephanie Ramos, our thanks to you tonight.
家を売るなら桜都市。突然の相続にお困りの方も桜都市。転勤
We turn now to the pandemic and the battle against the Omicron surge. More evidence that the U.S. appears to be turning the corner. The numbers of new infections now dropping or plateauing in 41 states. But many hospitals remain stretched. 82% of ICU beds nationwide are occupied with COVID and non-COVID patients. And there are concerns about the short supply of a new antiviral drug effective against Omicron. ABC's Zareen Shah is in Los Angeles.
Tonight, new evidence the record-breaking Omicron surge may be slowing. Hospital admissions down nearly 10% nationwide in the last week. And in 41 states, cases now plunging or plateauing, including California, where some officials now easing restrictions. Starting Tuesday, San Francisco lifting its indoor mask mandate for people who are up to date on their vaccinations in places like gyms and offices. But tonight, concerns about the low supply of what experts say may be a game-changing pill. Paxlovid from Pfizer, which has been shown to significantly reduce hospitalization and death by 89%.
The lack of supply has been concerning. It's been disheartening.
Most Americans won't have access to it for months. According to an ABC analysis of 3,100 counties in the U.S., only a fourth have doses available. Doctors now forced to decide who gets the potentially life-saving pills and who doesn't. Omicron treatments already scarce. The FDA recently removing authorization of monoclonal antibody treatments from Regeneron and Eli Lilly, saying it does not work against the highly transmissible variant. And tonight, a major bust in Long Island. 2 nurses arrested and charged with selling fake vaccination cards. Prosecutors say they made $1.5 million.
Here in LA, the Rams will take on the 49ers this weekend. One of the teams will make it to the Super Bowl in just 2 weeks right here in LA. It is a big event, but every attendee will get a KN95 mask and an at-home COVID test. Whit.
Zareen, thanks. We turn now to the pandemic and the battle against the Omicron surge. More evidence that the U.S. appears to be turning the corner. The numbers of new...
The South Korean military says a projectile launched early Sunday by North Korea was an intermediate-range ballistic missile. This is the 7th launch Pyongyang has conducted this year. The missile was fired from Mupyeongri in the northern province of Chagan into the Sea of Japan shortly before 8 a.m. The South Korean military says the missile flew about 800 kilometers at a maximum altitude of 2,000 kilometers. The missile is believed to have been launched on what is called a lofted trajectory, or at a steeper angle than usual to reach a higher altitude. South Korean experts say it is possible the missile was a Hwasong-12. North Korea fired this type of intermediate-range missile 3 times in 2017. South Korean President Moon Jae-in told the National Security Council that the current situation resembles 2017. At that time, Pyongyang fired a long-range ballistic missile after launching an intermediate one. Yonhap News Agency reports Pyongyang has fired an intermediate or longer-range missile for the first time since the launch of the Hwasong-15 intercontinental ballistic missile in November 2017. The agency also says Sunday's launch is the highest level of provocation in 4 years, and North Korea is more likely to resume ICBM tests and review its suspension of nuclear tests. For more on the latest launch, we spoke with Bong Yong-sik, a research fellow at Yonsei University's Institute for North Korean Studies in Seoul.
I think the strategic purpose of North Korea is to repeat the year 2017, when North Korea and the United States were in a collision course, with the cloud of the war in the Korean Peninsula becoming real in 2017, when Donald Trump criticized Kim Jong-un as a little rocket man and promised fire and fury on North Korea. And North Korea criticized Donald Trump as a warmonger. I think Kim Jong-un's aim is to escalate the military tension on the Korean Peninsula as high as possible, just like it did in the year 2017. And riding on the cloud of the war on the Korean Peninsula as a bargaining leverage on the United States, Japan, and South Korea, Kim Jong-un is likely to repeat what he did in January 2018, which is to propose an inter-Korean dialogue and meeting with the newly elected president of South Korea in May this year, and also send a message of peace and negotiation to the Biden administration early next year. So it's going to be the repetition of the same strategy, the escalation of tension and the message of peace in 2017 and 2018. So we are going to see more and more missile tests by North Korea as a fulfillment of its plan to develop its self-defense capability as promised in the 8th Party Congress. I don't think North Korea is going to cross the red line immediately, but let's wait for the Day of the Sun, the biggest anniversary of North Korea, the birthday of the first leader Kim Il-sung, which is April 15th. Why April 15th is a candidate for North Korea potentially cross the red line? Because North Korea's leadership has something to celebrate as a completion of the mission to build a country as a great nation. And April is a time very delicate for South Korean politics. We are going to have the president election on 9th of March, and the incumbent President Moon Jae-in is going to be out of office in May. So April is a very sensitive time for South Korea to take definitive response to any major provocation by North Korea. I think North Korea is going to take full advantage of the political calendar of South Korea, as well as Biden administration preparing for midterm election in November.
The UK Foreign Secretary says her country is considering deployment of extra troops to defend NATO member nations amid fears of a Russian invasion of Ukraine.
We are offering to deploy extra troops into Estonia. We are providing more air support across the Black Sea, and we're supplying defensive weapons to Ukraine to make sure that they are in the best possible position should Vladimir Putin try to stage an incursion.
Truss told Sky News that she will visit Ukraine this week and Moscow next week as part of her diplomatic efforts to avert the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But she added the UK plans to announce toughened sanctions targeting more Russian interests that are of direct relevance to the Kremlin. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson issued a statement on Saturday saying if President Putin chooses a path of bloodshed and destruction, it will be a tragedy for Europe. He added Ukraine must be free to choose its own future. Johnson is expected to hold telephone talks with Putin in the coming days. The latest economic data from China showed continued growth in factory production for the third consecutive month, but the rate of growth is slowing. The Purchasing Managers Index in January stood at 50.1, down from 50.3 a month earlier. Any number above 50 indicates growth. The survey covered 3,000 manufacturers. Some industries ramped up production ahead of the Lunar New Year holidays, but personal consumption declined due to the spread of coronavirus infections across China. The index for smaller enterprises also declined. These firms are being hit by soaring prices for crude oil and other raw materials. Analysts say restrictions on people's movement to prevent infections ahead of the Beijing Winter Games may hurt the speed of the recovery. The surge in Omicron cases is showing no sign of slowing down in Japan. Many medical institutions are overwhelmed with people showing symptoms of high fever or simply wanting to get tested. A clinic in Tokyo is one of them. The clinic is capable of treating 12 outpatients with high fever a day, besides regular patients, and provides PCR testing.
We are not available to accept a reservation for the outpatients with fever. It's full now. I'm sorry about that.
The appointment slots fill up quickly the day before, and all walk-ins are being refused. There was even one day when up to 60 people had to be turned away. The clinic also provides home care for people in isolation with COVID. The clinic says elderly people, those with underlying health conditions, and essential workers will be the first to get treated in order to stay open and avoid staff burnout.
There's a limit to what we can do. So the current situation is that we have no choice but to start prioritizing who to treat.
The doctor says he is also worried that the ages of patients coming to the clinic are gradually shifting from the 60s to 70s and 80s. Japan confirmed more than 78,000 new infections on Sunday nationwide.